I could still feel the morning breeze brushing against my cheeks as I stepped out of the car, carrying a quiet hope in my chest. The sun hung low above the venue, painting the sky with soft gold, and for a moment I let myself breathe in the sweetness of the day. My shoes tapped lightly against the pavement as I walked toward the entrance, pretending I didn't hear my heart flutter in a strange, nervous rhythm. Weddings are supposed to fill a mama with joy, right? Yet something inside me whispered that I should step carefully, like I was walking on a fragile surface no one else could see. The scent of fresh roses drifted from the doorway, mixing with the warm hum of chatter from inside. I adjusted the small wrapped box in my hand, my little gift, something simple but meaningful, and whispered a soft "ah" under my breath, trying to steady my spirit. My child had always told me I worried too much, but a mother's instinct rarely sleeps. Maybe that's why the air felt oddly heavy, as though the day had its own secrets tucked between those flowers and candles. If you're still here with me, tell me what city you're watching from. Every comment you leave feels like another step we take together in this story. And if this one touched your heart, tap the like button so more people can hear it too. Before I go on, let me introduce myself properly. I'm Grandma Nell, a 72-year-old woman with more stories tucked in these old bones than I ever thought I'd share. Life has pressed on me, shaped me, humbled me, and every now and then it drops another lesson right at my feet. Now, let me take you back into this moment. I reached the hallway leading toward the main hall, smoothing the fabric of my dress as I walked. I'd chosen something modest, soft-colored, nothing loud that might draw too much attention. I didn't come to shine. I came to witness a milestone in my child's life. My palms warmed as I held the gift closer to my side. I could already picture my boy smiling at me, giving me that tender grin that used to brighten even the dimmest afternoons. But as soon as I turned the corner, I saw her, his bride, standing like she'd been waiting for someone. Her chin lifted the moment her eyes landed on me. Before I could even offer a greeting, she strode forward with quick steps, her breath sharp, her expression tightening as though my presence had shifted the air. "Why are you here already?" she asked, voice low, clipped. The way she stared made something inside my stomach sink like a stone in water. I opened my mouth to answer, but she cut me off with a whisper colder than the breeze outside. "You don't belong here." Her words hit me so hard my breath caught, my fingers loosened around the gift, and for a split second I almost dropped it. A faint sigh slipped out of me, unintentional, trembling. My throat felt tight as though someone had drawn a string around it. I blinked at the young woman in front of me, trying to understand how a celebration could twist into something sharp so quickly. She leaned closer, lowering her tone even further, like she didn't want anyone else to hear the way she sliced into me. "This event is important," she said. "This crowd is important. And I can't have things look messy today. You get that, don't you? Messy." Was that what she saw when she looked at me? A mother who spent decades stretching pennies, holding families together, wiping tears, praying late into nights when the world wouldn't ease its grip? My lips parted, but no words came out. I felt a tight ache inside my chest, the kind that warms like a bruise. A quiet awe slipped into my breath before I could stop it. She stepped back slightly, adjusting the glittering bracelet on her wrist and glancing around as if making sure no one was paying attention. "Look," she muttered, "you can sit in the back, or maybe it's best if you just go. I don't want any tension today." For a moment, I simply stood there, my pulse thudding softly in my ears. I had imagined this day so differently, me walking in, my child spotting me, coming over with that smile that once melted every sorrow. But here I was, treated like a disruption to be pushed aside. I swallowed hard, lowering my gaze to the gift in my hand. The wrapping paper trembled under my fingers. My voice, when it finally rose, sounded quieter than I expected. I only came to see my child get married," I murmured. "Yeah," she replied, "and I'm telling you how to keep things peaceful, peaceful." Another word that tasted heavy on my tongue. I felt my breath shorten, as though someone had knocked the wind out of me. A faint escaped me, not quite agreement, not quite resistance, just a small sound trying to keep my heart from cracking open. I took a slow step back. Not because she told me to, but because I needed space to breathe. I needed room between her cold stare and my trembling spirit. She watched me retreat as though victory lived in the arch of her brow. And somehow that hurt almost as much as her words. The hallway stretched behind me, quiet except for the distant murmur of guests arriving. For a moment, I considered turning around, walking straight out of the building and sparing myself any further humiliation. I rubbed my thumb over the edge of the gift box, feeling the corner dig lightly into my skin. The pressure grounded me, but only just. A soft "oh dear" slipped out of me as I inhaled deeply. I had always believed kindness could calm storms, but that young woman wasn't dealing with weather. She carried her own thunder, and she was determined to strike. As I stood there, gathering the last pieces of my composure, a figure appeared at the far end of the corridor. The host, an old friend who had known my family for years, walked toward the main hall with a clipboard in his hand. He hadn't seen me yet, but the sight of him stirred something warm in my chest, something like relief, something like a lifeline. Before I could call out, the bride straightened, smoothing her dress, and rushed ahead of me, her heels tapping almost frantically as she tried to catch his attention. Maybe she feared I'd speak to him first. Maybe she just wanted to control the story before anyone else could. But she didn't know what he knew, and she didn't know what he would soon say. The air around us seemed to hum, like the moment before lightning finds its mark. I didn't know it then, but her world, so carefully polished and posed, was seconds away from cracking. And all I had to do was stand still long enough for the truth to arrive. Have you ever stood so close to a moment that you could almost feel it breathing against your skin, yet you weren't sure whether it would comfort you or cut you? That's what it felt like as I watched her hurry down that hallway, inching toward the man who had known my family long before she was even a thought in my child's life. For a heartbeat, I wondered if I should just slip away quietly. But something in me, some old, stubborn pulse, refused to move. I pressed a hand lightly against my chest, letting out a shaky as my breath wavered. My steps slowed, but I kept walking, each stride steady despite the sting still lingering from her earlier words. I wasn't chasing after her. I wasn't trying to interrupt. I simply needed to gather myself, to keep from folding into the ache that wanted to swallow me whole. The corridor echoed faintly with music drifting from the hall. Guests were settling in, their laughter floating through the doors like warm notes, soft and sweet. That sound used to soothe me. Today it brushed against my spirit with a strange gentleness, reminding me of why I'd come in the first place, to witness a moment that was supposed to bind two families together. But one family member had already tried to push me out. When I reached the corner, I stopped just before entering the main hall. The bride was standing there with the host, her voice lowered to a quick, breathless whisper. She kept glancing over her shoulder as if she expected me to storm in with accusations. I didn't. I simply stood a small distance away, trying to figure out what to do next. He didn't seem to notice her urgency at first. The man was flipping through papers on his clipboard, adjusting items on the table in front of him. She leaned in close, her words spilling fast, her hands gesturing nervously. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I could tell from her tight expression that she was scrambling, trying to control the narrative before anything slipped out of her grip. A soft "oh my" rose in my throat as I watched her. She looked elegant on the outside, every accessory polished, every curl perfectly placed. But the desperation in her movements gave her away. It was the subtle kind of panic that comes from fear of exposure, like someone standing on a stage realizing the curtains are about to rise too early. The host finally paused and glanced up at her. His expression didn't match her frantic tone. He looked calm, steady, almost puzzled. Then, slowly, he turned toward me. His eyebrows lifted the moment his eyes found mine. "Well, look who's here," he said warmly. His voice traveled across the hallway, filling the space between us with something comforting, something familiar. I tried to smile, but it trembled slightly at the corners. He stepped around the bride and came toward me, arms open in a gesture that wrapped around my weary heart like a blanket. "You made it. I was wondering when I'd see you." I exhaled softly, a tender slipping past my lips. "I didn't want to cause any trouble," I murmured. Trouble? He repeated, confusion flickering across his face. How could you cause trouble? You're the reason this whole celebration even came together. The bride froze behind him. It was subtle at first, the slight stiffening of her shoulders, the way her fingers curled inward around the fabric of her dress. She stared at the host, then at me, then back at him again, as if trying to decipher what he meant. Her lips parted just enough for her breath to escape, and I saw the first hint of pale worry creep across her expression. The host reached out and touched my arm gently. Don't stay hidden in the hallway. Come inside. There are plenty of people who want to greet you. My throat tightened with a mix of gratitude and sorrow. I nodded softly, swallowing the lump that formed from the contrast between his kindness and her earlier cruelty. The bride stepped forward, forcing a strained smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, I didn't realize you two knew each other so well," she said, her voice fluttering as though she were trying to regain her composure. "I was just telling him that we're still organizing the seating arrangements, so maybe—" He cut her off gently but firmly. "Everything's already set. I made sure of it." She stiffened again. He turned to me with a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "You'll be sitting near the front, of course?" "Of course." Such small words, yet they landed inside me like a soft heartbeat. I hadn't come here expecting any special placement. I hadn't come for recognition. I had simply come to witness joy. But hearing that gentle assurance felt like someone had laid a warm coat over my shoulders after a long walk in the cold. The bride's breath hitched just slightly, so faint most wouldn't notice, but I did. Her fingers twitched against her bracelet, making it jingle faintly. She tried to mask her worry with another tight grin. "Oh, well, that's great, wonderful, perfect." Her voice cracked on that last word. The host stepped closer to her. "You know," he said, lowering his tone just a little, "not everyone in this world gets a chance to say thank you to the person who made their dreams possible. Today, you'll get that chance." I felt the air ripple around us. She blinked rapidly, her face growing a shade paler, as though the ground beneath her heels had begun to shift. I don't know what you mean," she stammered. He didn't elaborate. Instead, he turned toward the doorway and gestured for me to follow him. "Come on," he said softly. "You shouldn't be standing alone in a hallway on a day like this." I hesitated for just a breath. Something inside me quivered, not from fear, but from the weight of knowing the moment was tilting, slowly revealing what had been hidden beneath the surface. As I stepped forward, the bride moved aside, but her eyes held onto mine for a long second. I saw something flicker in them. Not hatred, not anger, but raw uncertainty. Maybe even dread. She swallowed hard, and a faint "oh" fell from her lips, barely audible, as though she had finally sensed the storm coming for her carefully arranged world. The scent of roses drifted past me again as I entered the hall. Soft music swelled gently from the speakers. People turned, greeting one another with warm smiles, unaware of the quiet battle unfolding behind the scenes. I walked slowly, my heart balancing between hurt and hope. The host stepped forward and began checking the microphones, adjusting the speakers, preparing to address the room. His calm presence settled the air, grounding me. As he tested the audio, I caught the bride watching him from the doorway, her posture stiff, her fingers tapping anxiously against her arm. She had no idea what he planned to say, no idea that the truth was only moments from stepping into the light, and no idea that her earlier cruelty would soon echo through this hall louder than the music ever could. The world was shifting around her, and she could feel it. I remember gripping the handrail as I walked into that rehearsal hall, feeling this strange mix of pride and nervousness humming beneath my ribs. Weddings always stir something in me. Maybe it's because I've lived long enough to know that a big day can reveal people's real hearts, good or not so good. Still, I wanted to believe this time would be peaceful. My son deserved that much. My granddaughter deserved even more. But the room felt off the moment I stepped through the doorway. You ever walk into a place and feel the energy thump against your chest like you're interrupting something you didn't know was happening? That's how it felt. Folks were smiling, but not at me. A few whispered, glanced my way, and turned back around like they were checking whether someone had locked the door. My daughter-in-law, Lord help me, stood across the room with her maid of honor. She froze mid-sentence when she spotted me, then whispered something under her breath. The maid of honor's eyes slid toward me with this look that sat somewhere between pity and confusion. I tried to shake it off. I'd already promised myself this, Nell. Don't go looking for trouble. Your purpose today is love. I kept walking, smiling at the florist, the photographer, anyone who met my eyes. And then I saw my granddaughter, my sweet girl, standing in the corner, staring at the floor, worrying the hem of her dress between her fingers. Her shoulders looked too tight. Her jaw looked too still. I knew that posture. That was a child carrying something heavy. I walked over with my slow, soft steps. "Baby, you all right?" I asked gently. She nodded, but she didn't look up. "I'm okay, Grandma." Her voice trembled on that last word, and that's when I knew deep in my bones that something was going sideways. But before I could press her, my daughter-in-law swooped in like she'd been waiting for the exact second my mouth opened. "Mom," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "can I talk to you for a sec?" "Outside." Still, I followed her. I've always believed in giving folks a chance to say what they need to say, even if they choose the ugliest way to say it. We stepped into the hallway and the door clicked shut behind us. Her smile dropped so quick it hit the floor. "Look," she said, folding her arms, "I need you to understand something before tomorrow. Folks don't start sentences that way unless they're about to push you off a cliff emotionally. This wedding is delicate," she continued, "and people have expectations. So I'm asking you, please keep a low profile. Don't try to get involved in things that don't concern you." I blinked slowly. What exactly doesn't concern me? My grandchild? My son? The ceremony I was invited to? "You were invited out of courtesy," she snapped, "not because you're needed." I swear for a second the hallway tilted under my feet. I felt the air tighten around my throat. But I didn't let her see that. I kept my voice calm, steady as river stone. She pushed on before I could reply. "And tomorrow, during the seating, please don't sit up front. It's better if you stay toward the back. Honestly, you don't belong." She paused, like the words tasted wrong even for her, but she still let them slip. "You don't belong in the family section." I felt that sentence land like a slap made of pure ice. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't point a finger. I didn't ask her who she thought she was. I just studied her for a silent moment, letting her own words sit there between us like something toxic. "You don't want me near the family?" I asked softly. She lifted her chin. "It'll keep the peace." "But this is my family," I whispered. "My son, my granddaughter." She shrugged. "It's just for the ceremony. Don't make this bigger than it is." That right there made something deep in my spirit shift, like a hinge unlocking. I realized she wasn't trying to protect anything. She wasn't managing chaos. She was drawing borders she thought she had the authority to draw. Before I could respond, the door swung open behind us. My granddaughter stood there with red eyes. She looked at me, then at her mother, then back at me again, like she was caught between two storms. "Grandma," she whispered, "can I talk to you?" My daughter-in-law started to protest. "Honey, Grandma and I were..." But my granddaughter cut her off gently. "Please." I placed my hand on her shoulder, and together we stepped back into the rehearsal hall. But instead of walking to a quiet corner, she led me toward the back exit. The cold air hit us as she held the door open, and for a moment it felt good to breathe something clean. "Grandma, I'm sorry," she murmured. "For what, baby? For everything. For how she's acting. For what she said to you. I didn't want you to come today because I knew she'd be like this." "Why is she acting this way?" I asked softly. She hesitated, wringing her fingers the way she used to when she was 5 and afraid to tell me she broke a vase. "I told her..." She swallowed. "I told her I wanted you to walk me down the aisle for the rehearsal, just today, not tomorrow, just today." But she said no. She said you'd make everything about yourself. My knees nearly gave out, not because of the insult, because my granddaughter, my heart, had wanted me by her side. I cupped her chin gently. "You don't ever need permission to love me, baby, and you don't ever have to apologize for somebody else's fears." She nodded, tears spilling over. Then she whispered something I didn't expect. "Grandma, she's scared you'll take attention away from her tomorrow," she said. "She said you have a way of making people look at you." I laughed softly. "Baby, I'm 77. The only attention I take these days is from my heating pad." She cracked a tiny smile. But that moment, just that moment, felt like the whole world shifting, like the universe was telling me, "Hold steady, Nell. The truth will walk in soon, and you won't have to say a word." And Lord, if only I knew how right that was. The next morning, I woke before the sun even considered rising. That happens sometimes when life is stirring up something you can't quite name. My bones always know before my mind does. I sat there on the edge of my bed for a long minute, listening to the faint hum of my old house settling, feeling that strange heaviness sitting right behind my ribs. It wasn't sadness. Not exactly. It was me like the air before a summer storm, thick, charged, waiting. I brewed my tea slow, holding the warm mug between my palms, thinking about my granddaughter's face from the night before. Those trembling eyes, that soft apology that didn't belong on the lips of a child who had done nothing but love me. And then, of course, those cold words from her mother, "You don't belong in the family section." Even now, repeating it in my head made something inside me clench tight. But I've lived long enough to know when to fight and when to let the truth unravel on its own. And something deep in my spirit told me, "Nell, today you stay steady. Let them show who they are." I got dressed slowly, choosing a simple blue dress I'd worn to church many times. Nothing flashy, nothing that would invite the wrong kind of attention. I pinned my hair back, touched my earrings, my late husband's last Christmas gift to me, and took a breath. When I arrived at the venue, the parking lot was already buzzing. Cars lined neatly in rows, folks stepping out in outfits so bright they almost made the morning jealous. I walked toward the entrance with steady steps, holding my small purse close. The woman at the welcome table looked up and smiled. "Good morning. Are you with the bridal party?" "I'm the groom's mother," I answered gently. Her smile widened. "Oh, lovely. Please head inside. They're about to start pre-ceremony photos." But the moment I stepped in, I froze. My son was standing near the front with his tie crooked and his hair all tousled, looking every bit like a man wrestling with something heavy. His shoulders slumped when he saw me, relief, not stress, and he hurried over. "Mama," he whispered, pulling me into a quick hug. "I'm glad you're here. You thought I wouldn't come?" I asked. He rubbed the back of his neck. Things have been tense. Behind him, I caught a glimpse of my daughter-in-law. She was across the room, barking directions at the bridal party like a general preparing for battle. Her eyes swept the space, quick, sharp, irritated, and when they landed on me, her expression tightened. Not anger, not fear, something worse. A need for control. She marched toward us in those heels that sounded like arrows hitting wood. "Oh," she said flatly, "you came early." I blinked slowly. The invitation said 10. "Yes," she replied, smoothing her dress, "for seating. Photos are for immediate family." My son's jaw clenched. I saw it. A small movement, but telling. He looked between the two of us, torn. "Mom is immediate family," he said firmly. She opened her mouth, but whatever she wanted to spit out dissolved when the photographer approached with a clipboard. "We're ready," he said. "Let's get the parents first." My daughter-in-law plastered on that fake smile, the one that never reached her eyes, and looped her arm around my son's. "Perfect. Let's do the bride's family first then." "No," the photographer interrupted, shaking his head. "We're following the list the couple approved 3 weeks ago. Groom's mother first." She froze. Her eyes flicked to my son. "You told him that?" He crossed his arms. "Yes, she deserves to be in the photos." The photographer motioned to me. "Mom, right this way. For a moment, just a moment." My daughter-in-law's face looked like a mask cracking down the middle, but she said nothing. She couldn't, not with everyone watching. I stepped forward, standing beside my boy. He straightened his tie, placed his hand gently on my shoulder, and whispered, "You look beautiful, Mama." I patted his arm. "You clean up nice yourself." The photographer lifted his camera. "All right, on 3, 1, 2, And that's when I heard it. The hiss of a voice behind us. "This is ridiculous. She always steals the spotlight." I didn't turn, but I didn't have to. I knew exactly whose voice that was. But before the bitterness in those words could settle on my skin, the photographer snapped the picture. Then another. And another. With each flash, I felt something untangle inside me. Something steady rising, something warm and sure. After the photos, folks began taking their seats. Ushers guided guests to their places, handing out programs and smiling like they were part of a parade. I walked toward the front automatically. It's where parents sit, after all. But halfway down the aisle, a soft hand touched my arm. It was my granddaughter. "Grandma," she whispered, "come sit with me before the ceremony starts." She led me to a small side room filled with soft light from a single window. She closed the door behind us and exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. "Always." She sat down slowly, smoothing her dress across her knees. Her voice dropped to a shaky whisper. "I heard Mom talking last night. She said she didn't want you anywhere near the front today because she thinks you make people forget who the bride is." I sucked in a sharp breath. Not because of the insult, but because of how deeply insecurity can twist someone. "Baby," I said softly, "if someone feels overshadowed by kindness, that reflection has nothing to do with the person shining." Her lips pressed together. "Grandma, she's worried about something else too. What's that?" She looked down, voice thinning like paper. "She's scared that when the host starts announcing family names before the ceremony, yours will be the one the crowd reacts to." I blinked. "React? To me?" She nodded. "People know who you are. Mom hates that." I laughed once, quiet, surprised. "Lord, child, I worked at the same school for 40 years. That's hardly fame." "But people love you," she said simply. And there it was. The truth her mother couldn't say out loud. When it was time to line up, my granddaughter squeezed my hand. "Please don't leave yet." "I won't." We stepped out into the hall, and as she walked toward the bridal party, the host lifted his microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called out, "before we begin, we'd like to welcome the family of the groom." My daughter-in-law straightened her spine. "The mother of the groom," she smiled tightly, "Miss Nellie Johnson." And right then, right there, the entire room erupted with applause. Her smile shattered, her face went pale, and I knew the storm she'd tried to hide was finally breaking wide open. The sound of my name rolling through that grand hall hit me like a warm tide. For a second, I didn't even move. I just stood there, blinking at the crowd, watching people rise from their seats as if they'd been waiting for this exact moment. Some folks clapped slow and steady, others cheered outright, and a few old co-workers even called my nickname with little laughs that made my throat tighten. I hadn't expected any of that. I surely hadn't asked for it. But oh mercy, the sweetness of being recognized. Not for money, not for a title, but for a lifetime of quiet kindness. Felt like a balm on every bruise I'd collected these past months. I took one step forward, then another. And with each soft step, the noise grew louder, rising like a tide pushing back against the bitterness that had tried to swallow this day whole. But it wasn't the applause that caught my attention first. It was the silence right beside the bride, a silence so sharp it could have cut glass. My daughter-in-law stood frozen, bouquet trembling just slightly, her face drained of any color. Even her lips parted as though she'd forgotten how to breathe. She glanced wildly around, first at my son, then at her bridesmaids, then at the crowd, searching for someone, anyone, who might look confused enough to make her feel less exposed. But nobody looked confused. That's what rattled her most. She had expected people to squint, lean forward, whisper, "Who's that?" Instead, the opposite happened. Right across the aisle, 2 former students of mine, grown women now, waved like they were greeting a favorite aunt. An older gentleman from my neighborhood pressed his hand over his heart. One of the caterers whispered, "Is that Nell? Oh my goodness, she's here." Every reaction was a reminder she'd never anticipated, and I could almost hear the words she'd thrown at me before, "You don't belong here." That sentence sat heavy in the space between us. But today, the universe decided to answer it for her. I reached the front row and paused, unsure whether to sit or stand. But before I could choose, the host stepped forward with that wide, familiar grin of his. "Nell," he said warmly, "we are honored to have you with us today." I felt a soft gasp ripple through the crowd, my daughter-in-law stiffening at the sound of such public praise. The host wasn't done. "This woman," he continued, "has quietly supported this family in ways many of you don't know, and we intend to celebrate that generosity today." I heard a little whisper escape from somewhere behind the bridal party, almost a hiss, quick and ugly. But the host kept right on speaking, completely unfazed. "She is not just the mother of the groom, she is a pillar in our community, a mentor to many, and someone whose kindness has shaped countless lives. Please join me again in recognizing her." Another wave of applause rolled in. My breath hitched, my eyes stung. I felt my hand fly up to cover my mouth, not in embarrassment but in shock. A soft "oh dear" escaped my lips before I could stop it. Right then, the bride swayed a little, clutching her bouquet like it was the only thing keeping her upright. I could feel the storm building behind her eyes. My son stepped toward me quietly, touching the small of my back. "Mama," he whispered, "you okay?" I nodded, though my heart was fluttering like a bird that had just discovered the cage door was open. He turned slightly toward his wife. "You all right?" he asked her gently. She didn't answer. Her gaze stayed locked on me, wide, panicked, trembling, as if the entire foundation she'd built her pride on had just cracked. And maybe it had. When we all took our seats, she dabbed the corner of her eyes quickly, pretending it was emotion from the ceremony. But those tears weren't sweet. They were the kind you cry when a mask slips and you know everyone saw behind it. The host continued with the introduction of families, but the energy in the room had already shifted. The bride's relatives sat up straighter, whispering quietly. Her friends looked back and forth between her and the crowd, unsure what had just happened. The bridesmaids exchanged glances, their lips pressed tight. Then the host added one more line, gentle but powerful enough to shake the bride all over again. "And of course, we extend special gratitude to Nell for her support in making today's celebration possible." A soft murmur swept through the guests. My daughter-in-law's grip tightened around her bouquet so hard I heard the faint crunch of stems. She knew exactly what that meant. And so did everyone else. My son blinked toward me, stunned. "Mama, you didn't tell me. I didn't think it needed saying," I replied softly. But her eyes, oh, the bride's eyes, flashed. For a split second, she looked like she wanted to snatch the microphone and rewrite the entire narrative. Pride is a strange thing. It can make a person do foolish, desperate things. She took a step closer to the host. "Excuse me," she said quietly, voice tight. "I wasn't aware we were doing all of this." Her tone carried that familiar edge, polished in front of strangers but sharp enough to slice skin when used privately. The host didn't flinch. "The groom approved this," he said simply, "and it's tradition to acknowledge contributions." Her lashes fluttered rapidly, like she was fighting the urge to erupt. The ceremony music began to hum through the speakers before she could reply. That saved her from saying something she'd surely regret. The bridesmaids began lining up, adjusting their dresses, fixing hairpins, whispering reminders. The excitement in the room built again, but something about it felt different now. The joy was still there, but it no longer flowed around her, it flowed around me, and she felt it. I saw her swallow hard, staring straight ahead, trying to reclaim control of her breath. But it wasn't working. Not with the room still buzzing, not with her image slipping, not with my name still lingering in the air like incense. As the music swelled, she had to move forward, because that's what the ceremony required. But every step she took looked hesitant, almost trembling, like walking through water. My son squeezed my hand one last time before joining the wedding procession. "Mama," he whispered softly, "whatever's going on, thank you." I wanted to answer him, but emotion caught in my throat, a warm, bittersweet ache. So all I managed was a soft hum that fluttered with feeling. When he walked away, I settled into my seat. But before I could fully exhale, someone tapped my shoulder gently. I turned. It was one of the bride's cousins, a young woman with gentle eyes. She leaned close and whispered, "Thank you for coming. You brought more grace into this room than you know." The words landed softly. But behind them, something darker stirred. Because even though the ceremony was about to begin, the real confrontation hadn't happened yet, and I could feel it coming, slow, heavy, inevitable, like thunder rolling in from the far edge of a quiet sky. A single violin note floated through the hall like a thin ribbon of air, the kind that makes your skin prickle before you even realize why. That sound always reminded me of soft rain tapping against my porch roof back home, and for a moment it steadied my breath. But the calm didn't last long, because as soon as the melody deepened, tension began to coil around the room again, quiet, invisible, heavy. The wedding procession marched forward with practiced grace, but my eyes kept drifting toward the bride. Every flicker of her expression, every stiff movement told me she was unraveling under the weight of the moment. The ceremony lights washed over her face, highlighting the strain in her jaw. Even her smile, usually polished and camera-ready, looked brittle, barely hanging on. I couldn't help but wonder if she realized the truth. This wasn't about money or recognition. It was about dignity, respect. The kind of simple decency that shouldn't have to be begged for. Ah, mercy. Sometimes life has a way of giving lessons exactly when they're needed, whether a person wants them or not. As the last bridesmaid reached the altar, the hall hushed completely. The officiant stepped forward with a warm grin, ready to begin the vows. But before he could say a word, a small commotion stirred near the back of the aisle. Someone whispered, "Is that her?" Another hushed voice answered, "Yes, that's the mother, the one he mentioned." I felt warmth rush to my cheeks, not embarrassment, something gentler, something that made my chest swell just a little. I folded my hands in my lap to keep them from trembling. A soft awe slipped from me as the moment washed over my heart. The officiant cleared his throat, trying to reclaim the room's attention. "We gather today," he began slowly, "to celebrate love, commitment, and the joining of families." But my daughter-in-law wasn't listening. Her gaze darted around the hall like she was searching for a crack to slip through. She tugged at her dress, smoothed her hair, adjusted her necklace, tiny, restless movements revealing the storm inside her. When our eyes met, she looked away so fast she nearly dropped her bouquet. I should have felt triumphant, I suppose. Vindicated. But I didn't. Instead, a heavy ache settled in my chest, the kind that feels like an old bruise being pressed. I whispered under my breath, "Lord, guide us," trying to keep my heart steady. Just then, the officiant invited everyone to sit, and a soft rustle of fabric filled the hall. My seat creaked gently beneath me as I settled back again. Before I could exhale fully, a voice leaned close on my left. "You raised a good man," the woman whispered kindly. I swallowed hard. "Thank you," I murmured, trying not to let the emotion show too much. But a tiny sniffle still escaped me, uninvited and warm. At the altar, the groom reached out to take his bride's hand. The gesture should have been tender, symbolic, yet something about the way she hesitated before placing her fingers in his palm made the guests shift nervously. My son smiled nonetheless, choosing grace over discomfort. He'd always been that way, steady, patient, almost too forgiving. When he looked toward our row, his eyes found mine, and he gave a tiny nod. That small gesture, barely noticeable, felt like he was saying, "I see you, I'm grateful." But the bride stiffened again. Her jaw clenched, her shoulders tightened, her breaths quickened. It was clear the honor I received earlier had thrown her entire vision of the day off balance. She'd planned everything down to the last detail, and my unexpected recognition had shattered the image she'd tried to create, one where she controlled every narrative. The officiant continued, "Marriage is built on trust and understanding." The bride blinked rapidly, and for a moment I feared she might faint. A quick gasp left her lips, barely audible but sharp enough that her maid of honor glanced over in alarm. Still, the ceremony moved forward. "Are you ready to share your vows?" My son nodded and pulled a small, folded paper from his pocket. The room softened instantly. His voice carried with warmth, steady and honest, the kind that made my heart swell with pride. As he spoke about loyalty, sacrifice, and the promise to honor the past while building a future, I felt tears gather in my eyes. I dabbed the corner of one gently with my thumb, releasing a quiet sigh when emotion buzzed through my lungs. But when he said, "Thank you for welcoming my family into your heart," his bride flinched. She knew exactly what that line meant. She knew I had watched her treat me like a burden, an afterthought, a shadow to be pushed aside. And now, hearing him speak of inclusion and family so sincerely made her discomfort bloom again, sharp and visible. When it was her turn to read vows, she hesitated. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded her paper. I could see the strain across her brow, how she forced her mouth into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The guests leaned slightly forward in anticipation. She started with a shaky breath. I promise to cherish," but her voice cracked. The hall held its breath. She cleared her throat, trying again. "I promise to honor." Her voice broke once more, and this time she didn't hide her frustration. A soft growl, barely audible, escaped her. A maid of honor placed a steady hand on her back, whispering something that made her jaw twitch. She glanced toward me again, and I swear her glare held a dozen angry storms behind it. Her mask was slipping. The officiant stepped in gently, giving her time to regroup. "It's all right," he murmured. "Take a moment." But even those tender words felt like added pressure. She inhaled sharply, trying to compose herself, and forced a stiff smile at the crowd. Someone in the back whispered, "She seems nervous." Another replied, "Maybe shaken by that announcement earlier." I looked down at my clasped hands, trying to keep my heart steady. I didn't want to make her suffer, not like this. I didn't want to be the cause of humiliation, even if she had treated me harshly. Dignity matters both ways. The officiant's voice eventually guided the ceremony forward, gently steering the bride through the remaining lines of her vows. Bit by bit, she regained composure, though the tremble in her hand never left. When both vows were completed, the officiant announced the exchange of rings. My son took a ring with a firm, steady hand. His bride accepted her band with a shaky inhale. The symbolism might have been beautiful, but the tension wrapped around it made the air feel thick. The room held a strange mixture of excitement and unease. And yet, somehow, the ceremony continued its steady march toward the final declaration. But as the officiant prepared to pronounce them married, a soft murmur began near the middle rows. Several guests exchanged glances. Something had happened, or was about to, and I could feel it settling over the hall like low thunder. Because the bride wasn't the only one shaken by today's truth. Someone else had risen from their seat, someone whose presence wasn't part of the plan. And the moment I saw who stepped into the aisle, a shiver fluttered up my spine like a cold wind sneaking through an open window. The story was about to turn again, and this time the shift wouldn't be gentle. You ever feel a chill run through your body even when the room ain't cold? Like your spirit knows something is shifting even before your mind catches up? That's exactly how I felt that morning, though I didn't understand why. Not yet. I woke up before the sun, that strange heaviness sitting on my chest like a sleeping cat. I tried brushing it off, telling myself it was just the weight of everything I'd been holding lately. My son's distance, the unease in my daughter-in-law's smile, the way my home suddenly felt like a rented room instead of the place I'd poured my whole life into. But deep down, my bones, they were whispering, "Something's coming, Nell. Pay attention." I moved slow that morning, fixing myself a cup of coffee and watching the steam twist up into the air. It reminded me of the way life slicks out of your hands when you're not holding it tight enough. My mama used to say, "When the air feels heavy, a storm's already on its way." Lord, I wish I'd listened harder, because if I had, I might have been ready for what landed on my doorstep that evening. The day had been long, too long. I'd gone through closets full of memories, sorting through things I hadn't touched in years. I was preparing for something I couldn't name, almost like nesting but backwards. Instead of building, I was letting go. And every picture I touched, every knick-knack that held a story, felt like a quiet goodbye I didn't understand. Around 5, I sat on the porch with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. The air had turned cold, fast, sharp enough to sting my cheeks. The sky looked like it was swallowing the sun whole, orange turning to bruised purple. That's when I saw his car pull up. My son, driving slow, too slow, like a man rehearsing bad news. I whispered, "Lord, hold me steady," under my breath. He stepped out, hands shoved in his pockets, shoulders curled inward. That boy used to walk tall, back straight, head up, full of that stubborn fire I'd raised him on. But lately, he walked like somebody who'd put his heart in the wrong set of hands and didn't know how to ask for it back. "Ma, hey," he said, voice cracking just a little. "Evening, baby," I replied softly, though my palms were starting to sweat. He didn't come sit next to me, didn't lean down to kiss my cheek, just hovered in the doorway like a shadow looking for a wall to cling to. "You cold?" he asked. "No," I said, even though I was shivering. "Just thinking." He nodded, eyes darting everywhere except at me. That's when I knew. Whatever he'd come to say was something he wasn't proud of. "Ma," he tried again, "we need to talk." Those 4 words are never followed by good news. Not once in the history of mamas and grown children. "All right," I said, keeping my voice calm, gentle, the way I used to when he'd come home with scraped knees. He finally sat down, elbows on his thighs, looking at the gravel between his shoes. "I don't really know how to start." "Well," I said, "start where it hurts." He let out a shaky breath. "It ain't about me, not really. I could feel that storm I'd sensed all day start rumbling in the pit of my stomach." "It's about her, isn't it?" I asked quietly. He swallowed. "Yeah, it's about her." Of course it was. That girl, his wife, had been circling me like a polite little hawk ever since she walked into his life. Smiling, sweet, talking sweet, but watching everything, like she was taking notes on how to rearrange things that weren't hers. "What happened?" I asked. He hesitated, too long. That kind of silence ain't clean. It's not a pause, it's a warning. Well, he rubbed his palms together slowly. She thinks it's time for us to look into our future. I stiffened. "And what does my future have to do with that?" He winced. "Ma, just listen, okay?" "No," I said. "Tell me straight." His shoulders fell. "She's been saying that this place makes her uncomfortable." I stared at him blankly. "My home?" "She says it feels too crowded." "Crowded," I repeated. "Baby, it's just me." I know," he said quickly, hands up like he was trying to calm me down. "But she thinks it's not really practical for us to keep 2 places going. She keeps telling me it's not good financially." Ah, there it was. The first lightning flash in that storm. "So let me make sure I'm hearing this right," I said slowly. "She thinks my house, the one your daddy and I built with our hands, is an inconvenience." He opened his mouth, closed it, then finally whispered, "She just wants us all to move forward." "Forward," I repeated. "And where exactly am I supposed to move?" He didn't answer. Didn't have to. In that silence, I saw it, like a shadow behind his eyes. The decision had already been made. And it wasn't mine. I leaned back, the porch creaking under me, heart beating slow but painful, like each thud was an apology from my own body. "You didn't come here to ask me," I whispered. "You came here to tell me." He flinched. "Ma, please don't." "No," I said softly. "Finish it. Say the words. Don't let me pull 'em out of you." He looked up at me then, eyes glossy, jaw clenched, like he was trying to hold both love and guilt in the same breath. "She wants to sell the house," he finally said. "She thinks it's the best option." The world went quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like the air is holding its breath. My own breath left me slow. I didn't gasp, didn't shout, didn't cry. I just let the truth settle. Like dust on old furniture, I whispered, "And what do you think?" He closed his eyes. And that's when I knew. He wasn't on my side, not this time, not when it counted. My bones had been right. The storm was here, and I was standing alone in the middle of it. What do you do when the person you love the most is the one standing on the wrong side of the line? That was the question, clawing at my chest the moment the truth settled between us on that porch. For a long moment I couldn't speak. I just looked at my son, my only child, trying to recognize the boy I raised behind the man who couldn't meet my eyes. His shoulders were slumped forward like he was bracing for impact. But the real blow wasn't mine, it was the one he'd already chosen to give me. I folded my blanket tighter around my shoulders, more for comfort than warmth. "So," I said slowly, "she wants to sell my home." He swallowed hard. "It's not just her wanting it, Ma. We talked about it together." "No, baby," I said softly, my chest aching. "You all might have talked, but only one of you was listened to." He winced like my words stung. "This ain't fair. Fair. That word." I nearly laughed. I'd spent my whole life stretching myself thin for fairness. Being fair when people weren't kind. Being fair when life knocked me down. Being fair even when nobody else bothered. And now my own child wanted fairness to explain taking the roof from over my head. "Baby," I whispered, "fairness left this conversation the moment you all made a decision without me." He ran his hands over his face. "Ma, please, just hear me out." I nodded. I always heard him out, even when it hurt. He took a deep breath. "She's pregnant." My entire world stopped. The porch, the breeze, the evening light. Everything froze. And then, all at once, everything made sense. The rush, the whispering, the sudden shift in their tone the last few months. The way she had been looking at my house like she was measuring the walls for room she wanted to fill. "You're," my voice cracked, "you're having a baby." He nodded, eyes watering. "Yeah, we just found out. And we're excited, Ma, we really are. But we need stability, we need space, and we can't afford everything at once." "And what does that have to do with me being kicked out my home?" I asked, my voice firm now, my spine straightening. He looked down again. And I saw it. The truth he wasn't saying, it had everything to do with convenience. Their convenience. "Ma, we can't buy a house unless we sell this one." There it was, plain, cold, sharp, like a blade slid across a table. He wasn't here to talk, he was here to take. I closed my eyes for a moment, steadying myself. My heart felt like it was unraveling thread by thread. When I opened them, he was watching me, waiting for my reaction like a child waiting for punishment. But I didn't yell, didn't sob, didn't fall apart. I just asked, "And where exactly am I supposed to go while you'll start this new life?" His mouth opened, then closed. It took him too long to answer. And when he did, his voice was barely above a whisper. "We thought maybe you could stay with Aunt Rosa for a while. Aunt Rosa, a woman I loved, yes, but also a woman who lived 2 states away in a tiny apartment she could barely heat in winter." "Baby, I'm almost 70, I whispered. "I ain't got the bones to climb 3 flights of stairs every day." He looked away. "And you weren't planning on telling me until everything was already done, were you?" I asked gently. His silence was my answer. Something inside me shifted then, not broken, not yet, but something deep cracked open. I sat back, staring at the fading horizon. "Ma," he said softly, "we're trying to build our future." "And I'm part of that future," I said. "Ain't I?" He hesitated. "You know," I whispered, "when you were little, I used to worry I wasn't giving you enough. Not enough time, not enough hugs, not enough attention. I'd lie awake wondering if I was failing you." His eyes glistened. "You weren't. You never were." "Then explain to me," I said, voice trembling despite my strength, "how the boy I raised with love and sacrifice grew into a man who could sit here and tell me I'm optional." He shut his eyes like the words hurt him. "Good. Pain means you're still human." "I'm not saying that," he insisted. "You're my mother. I love you. But we gotta think logically. This house is equity." I held up my hand. "Don't you dare talk about my home like it's a math problem." He stopped. "This house ain't equity," I said quietly. "It's my life, my memories, your father's sweat, my tears, your childhood." His jaw trembled, but he stayed silent. "And you're telling me," I continued, "that because somebody whispered future in your ear, you're willing to erase all that history like it never mattered?" He rubbed his forehead. "Ma, it ain't like that." "Then what's it like?" I asked. "Because from where I'm sittin', it looks like your wife points, and you move." His face flushed with shame. "That's not fair. There's that word again." I shook my head. "But not at the cost of destroying mine." He opened his mouth to speak, but I kept going. You're asking me to step aside so you can step forward. But life don't work like that. Families ain't roads you clear, they're bridges you protect. His eyes softened, but his silence stayed. And that's when I realized he wasn't torn. He wasn't undecided. The conflict I was drowning in, he'd already climbed out of. He'd chosen her, their future, their convenience, over me. I whispered, "Baby, what you're doing ain't just hurtful, it's dangerous." He frowned. "Dangerous?" "Yes," I said softly, "because once you cross a line with your mama, you don't get to pretend it never happened." He swallowed, and I could tell. For the first time that night, he felt the weight of what he'd set in motion. They say sometimes you can feel a storm coming long before the clouds pull in. That evening, sitting across from my grown child, I felt that storm settling deep in my bones. The old boards beneath us creaked under the weight of something heavier than age. I could almost hear my late husband's voice in that creak, like he was whispering that I wasn't wrong to feel the ground shifting. My boy rubbed his palms together, nervous. I could see he was trying to find courage in excuses instead of truth. "Ma," he murmured, "I know this is hard. I know this hurts. Lord." The word didn't even scratch the surface. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "Baby, it ain't just hard, it's bewildering. I keep asking myself, where did I go wrong raising you?" He winced. "Don't say that." "Then explain it to me," I whispered. "Explain how you got to a place where you think tossing your mama out her house is a solution to anything." His shoulders sagged. His voice dropped low, like he was confessing to an invisible judge. "I'm tired, Ma. I'm tired of feeling like I can't give my family more. I'm tired of feeling small. I'm tired of watching other people move ahead while we're stuck." There it was. The crack in his armor. Not greed, not malice. Fear. Fear of failure. Fear of not being enough for the woman he married. Fear of fatherhood. I softened a little, breath trembling. "Baby, who told you you're stuck?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes flicked toward the driveway, toward the empty space where her car usually sat. And I knew. "She said you're behind," I murmured. "Didn't she?" He stayed silent. Silence is just truth with no place to hide. I felt something inside me wilt, not break. No, breaking implies something sudden. This was slower, a kind of fading. "You know," I said after a long moment, "your father used to say, a real partner don't make you feel small, they make you feel steady." He swallowed. "She believes in me." "I don't doubt she does," I said gently, "but there's a difference between believing in someone and pushing them past their own people." He ran a hand through his hair. "Ma, please. I need you to understand, we're starting a family. We need security." "Security," I repeated, tasting the word in my mouth like it was something foreign. "And my security? Where does that land?" "You have family," he said quickly. "You wouldn't be alone." That's when my voice broke a little. "But I wouldn't be home." His jaw clenched. "And you didn't even ask me," I continued. "You didn't say, 'Mama, could we find a different way?' You didn't say, 'Mama, let's figure this out together.' You went straight to the easiest path, the one where your mama is an obstacle, not a person." He opened his mouth, then shut it again, overwhelmed. The wind picked up, brushing against my face. It felt almost like a soft warning. Things were changing, and not in a way I could stop. "You keep mentioning space," I said. "A nursery, a yard, a safer neighborhood. But baby, all those dreams can be chased without taking what keeps me standing." He shook his head. "We don't have other options." I leaned back and looked him in the eyes. "Or maybe you don't want to see them." He froze. And something in that moment, the way he didn't deny it, cut deeper than anything he'd said all night. A long silence settled between us, heavy as humidity before a downpour. The porch light flickered once. He looked up, startled. "What was that?" "Oh, wiring," I whispered. "Your daddy said he'd fix it someday." Guess life got in the way. The flicker felt symbolic somehow, like something familiar was warning me it wouldn't last forever. I took a slow breath. Baby, I'm asking you, just this once, are you sure this is what you want? Because if you go down this road, you might reach a place you can't come back from. His eyes softened, but not with understanding, with guilt. Ma, he whispered, I have to do right by my wife. I swallowed down a sharp ache. And you think doing wrong by me is the price? He stared at his hands, shoulders trembling. I didn't know if he was realizing or unraveling. Maybe both. I'm going to be a father, he whispered. And I'm going to be a grandmother, I said quietly. But I won't be a burden for the sake of y'all's convenience. He looked up, confused. What does that mean? It means, I said softly, I see the path you're leaning toward, and I ain't blind enough to ignore it. His forehead creased. Ma, don't make this harder. I ain't making anything, baby. I'm just recognizing what is. The air felt colder suddenly. The kind of cold that slicks beneath your sweater and settles close to your ribs. I reached out and touched his hand. He didn't pull away, but he didn't hold on either. I love you, I whispered, more than I can put into words. But love don't survive on one side, baby. It takes two people leaning in, not one leaning while the other pushes. His throat bobbed. I don't want to hurt you. But you already did, I said softly. You just ain't felt the full weight yet. He shut his eyes, and I could tell deep in my spirit that the storm was closer than ever. He wasn't ready for the consequences. He wasn't ready for the break. He wasn't ready for the truth he'd already set in motion. But it was coming. Oh, it was coming, and neither of us could stop it now. I didn't realize a heart could break twice in the same week, but that night, mine found a new way to crack. The morning sun pushed through my curtains like it was determined to drag me out of bed, but I lay there for a long moment, listening to the quiet. The kind of quiet that wasn't peaceful, just hollow. A little sigh slipped from me, soft and tired, as I pushed myself up and wrapped my old robe around my shoulders. My boy had gone home the night before, leaving behind a porch full of heavy words and air too thick for easy breathing. I stared at the cold spot on the cushion where he'd sat, remembering the way he kept rubbing his palms together like he was scrubbing guilt right off his skin. I walked into the kitchen and held the counter for a second. My hands trembled a little, not from age, but from something deeper. A kind of ache that settles behind the ribs when you know something precious is shifting out of your grip. The kettle clicked on, humming low. I watched the steam curl upward like it was trying to show me how to rise, how to lift myself out of this mess. But mercy, I felt weighed down. When the phone buzzed on the table, I flinched. I didn't want to see her name. I didn't want to hear her voice. And I sure didn't want to deal with whatever demand she had lined up for me at 8 a.m. But it wasn't her name glowing on the screen. It was my cousin, Leela. Morning, Nell, she said when I answered. You sound like you swallowed a rain cloud. That pulled out a small, sad chuckle from me, something like that. You all right? No, I whispered, but I'm breathing. She paused, the quiet thick with worry. Want me to come by? I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. Baby, don't trouble yourself. I just need a minute to gather my spirit. But after we hung up, I stayed there at the table, hands around a warm mug, mind drifting to the words my own child spoke. We need more space. We need security. We don't have options. Lord, if desperation had a voice, it was the tremble in his throat last night. But fear don't excuse pushing your mama out her home. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was her. My chest tightened. I almost didn't answer. But I did. Her voice slid through the line, smooth as glass. Good morning. Are you available to talk? Something about the way she asked made my skin prickle. Go on, I murmured. Well, she started, clearing her throat softly. After speaking with my husband last night, we've decided it would be best to move forward with our plan as soon as possible. My hand tightened around the mug. Your plan. Yes, she didn't hesitate. We found a realtor who's willing to help us list the house quickly. And she says with the market the way it is, we might get a strong offer within a week. A weak sound escaped me, half disbelief, half heartbreak. She continued talking, breezy as wind, as if she hadn't knocked the breath right out my chest. In order for that timeline to work, we'd need you to start packing. Just the basics for now. Sentimental items, essentials, clothing. Once we secure a buyer, we'll arrange movers to help with the rest. My throat tightened. I couldn't speak for a moment. She paused, maybe realizing my silence wasn't agreement. "Mrs. L," she called, using that stiff, polite tone that carried no affection. "Did you hear me?" "I heard you," I whispered. "Then do you have any questions?" Questions. Lord, I had a whole ocean of questions. But I started with the one that felt like it was burning through my chest. "Where exactly do you think I'm going?" She hesitated. "We assumed you would stay with your sister. She has the room, doesn't she?" "My sister is 78, I snapped, the hurt finally scraping its way into my voice. "She don't need company. She needs rest." "Well, we don't have many alternatives," she said crisply. "Our child needs stability. We're doing what's best for our family." "And I ain't family?" I asked, voice trembling. She didn't answer. And that silence, it hurt more than anything she could have said. I took a shaky breath. "You know, I've tried to welcome you. I've tried to understand your ways. But this right here, baby, this ain't love. This ain't partnership. This is bulldozing, plain and simple." Her voice sharpened. "I think you're overreacting." A small, weary sound slicked out of me. Part disbelief, part tired sadness. "Lord have mercy, if this ain't overreacting, then what is?" She exhaled, clearly irritated. "We're not trying to fight. We're simply planning for our future. And this house is my past, my present, and the only place I feel my feet planted," I whispered. "It holds every laughter my husband left behind, every memory my hands built." She didn't soften, not 1 inch. "Well," she said, clipped and cold, "your son believes this is the right decision. And so do I." My breath caught. It cut deep, hearing her use his name like armor. "I'll speak to him," I murmured, voice barely holding steady. "You already did," she replied calmly. "He's firm." When the call ended, I stayed frozen in that chair, fingers trembling around my mug. A long, shaky breath escaped me, almost a whimper, as the weight of it all settled in. They weren't just pushing for a house sale. They were pushing me out of the life I built with my own 2 hands. And suddenly, a realization hit me like a wave. If I didn't draw a line soon, they'd cross every last one. And the person I'd lose wouldn't be just my child, it'd be me. The scent of fresh rain drifted through my kitchen window that morning, carrying with it a kind of calm that didn't match the storm twisting in my chest. The sky outside looked washed clean, soft grey clouds stretching low over the neighborhood like a blanket pulled too tight. I stood at the sink, letting the cool air brush my cheeks while my fingers tapped weakly against the counter. My nerves were jumpy, buzzing under my skin, but the world outside seemed to whisper, "Slow down, breathe a little." I tried, Lord knows I tried, but my heart kept beating like it was knocking on a locked door. I wrapped my sweater around myself and moved toward the table where yesterday's heartbreak still lingered like a shadow. Their voices echoed in my head, their plans, their deadlines, their cold certainty. For a moment, I let out a soft awe, a quiet sound that slipped out without permission, the kind that comes from a soul trying not to fall apart. I sat for a moment, staring at the half-finished cup of tea from the night before, the one I'd abandoned when the phone call left me trembling. The liquid was dark and still, and something about that stillness felt familiar, like me, held in place by grief too heavy to stir. But there's only so long a woman can sit with hurt before it starts turning into something else. Resolve, fire, a little spark inside that says enough now. I pushed the cup aside and stood straighter. "I ain't packing a single box," I murmured to the empty room. My voice didn't shake this time. The words rolled through me like warm sunlight pushing through clouds. Firm, solid, mine. I reached for my phone, not to call them, not to argue, not to beg for space in a house that already held my whole life. No. I dialed the realtor who helped me and my husband buy this home 28 years ago. Miss Audrey. Silver hair, sharp glasses, sharper mind. A woman who never let folks play games with what wasn't theirs. She answered on the second ring, cheerful as ever. "Nell! Oh my goodness, sugar, I haven't heard from you in ages." Her voice wrapped around me warm, and I laughed a little, shakily. Afternoon, baby. I hope I ain't interrupting anything. You sound tight around the edges. Truth doesn't always need a speech. Sometimes it just needs a breath. I need some help, I said softly. It's about my house. The shift in her tone was immediate, still kind, but sharper. What about it? I think someone's trying to push me out of it. I heard her inhale. Oh, sweetheart, I knew something was off last time I saw your boy with that young lady. Go on. Tell me what's happening. So I did. Slowly at first, then all at once. The pressure, the plans I was never part of, the rushed timeline, the cold tone, the way they talked about my home like it was some item they could roll into their future without considering my place in it. Miss Audrey stayed quiet the whole time, letting me spill every crack in my heart across that phone line. When I finished, she made a sound, not angry, not shocked, but disappointed. Baby, that ain't right at all. I know, I whispered, and I'm tired of feeling like the ground is shifting under me. Well, let me steady it, she said. First things first, your name is the only one on that deed. Your house isn't going anywhere unless you decide it. A breath of relief slipped out of me, soft, shaky, but real. Second, she continued, voice firm as brick, nobody's listened to anything without your signature. And third, if they're trying to pressure you into something, you need to get yourself protected. I've been thinking that, I murmured. I'll text you the number of a good attorney, and I'll come by tomorrow morning. We'll go through your paperwork. My voice wavered with gratitude. Thank you, baby. Really, don't you thank me, she said. You thank yourself for not letting them steamroll you. The kind built from years of survival, from decades of getting back up, even when life tried to keep me down. Lord knows I've bent, but I ain't breaking. I walked through the hallway slowly, fingertips brushing the walls my husband painted. Every corner held a memory. Baby pictures, the smell of Sunday supper, the sound of my son's little feet running down the hall. I paused at a photograph framed in oak, my boy at 7 years old, grinning wide with 2 missing teeth. Back then he thought I hung the moon. I swallowed hard and whispered, "Where did you go, baby?" No answer came, only the echo of the quiet house. And in that moment, in that soft breath of wind, I felt a reminder of who I was, a woman who built a life, not out of luxury but out of love. A woman who stood tall even when her spirit was tired. A woman who deserved respect, not eviction. The phone buzzed again. His name this time. I picked up the phone slowly, bracing for a fight. Or worse, another cold explanation. "Hey, Ma," he said quietly. "Can we talk?" His voice sounded different. Shaky, like he'd swallowed something sharp. I didn't know yet if he was regretting, realizing, or rehearsing another request. But I knew one thing, this time I wasn't walking into that conversation unprotected. "All right," I said softly. "We can talk. Come by." The moment I hung up, I pressed my palm to my chest. The beat under my hand was steady, strong, no more bending, no more sacrificing my home for someone else's ease, no more becoming small so others could feel big. When he walked through that door later, he'd be meeting a different version of me, not angry, not cold, not broken, just clear. And sometimes, clarity is the most powerful weapon a woman can hold. I stepped into that quiet hallway with a strange heaviness pressing against my ribs, like something old and aching had followed me there. The music from the reception drifted through the walls, muffled but cheerful, completely unaware of the storm settling right behind it. For a moment, I just leaned against the floral wallpaper and let out a slow breath, one that trembled more than I wanted to admit. I didn't want to cry, heavens no. But sometimes the sting behind your eyes comes before you can reason with it. I whispered a soft "Oh mercy" under my breath, trying to gather myself. Then I heard footsteps. Quick, nervous ones. She appeared from around the corner, her dress swaying as she hurried toward me. Her face held a tightness, not anger this time, but something that looked suspiciously like fear, wearing a fragile disguise. She paused, just a couple of steps away, clutching her hands together in front of her, and for a heartbeat, neither of us said a thing. That silence felt sharp. Can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't answer at first, I simply watched her. She swallowed hard, her eyes darting around like she was searching for some safe place to set them. When she finally looked at me again, her gaze wavered. I could see it, the beginning of guilt wrestling with pride. I'd seen that look on grown folks who had gone just a little too far and suddenly realized the edge was sharper than they meant it to be. "Go on," I murmured. She took a tiny step closer. "I didn't know," she said quickly, like she needed the words out before courage escaped her. "I didn't know they'd call your name like that. I didn't expect it." "I didn't think it would. I didn't know it would go that far." I lifted a brow. "You didn't know humiliating someone might end up backfiring on you?" My tone wasn't cruel, but it was steady enough that her shoulders curled inward. "No, I mean—" She stopped, exhaled, then tried again. "I shouldn't have said what I said earlier." "I shouldn't have told you that." Her voice cracked a little near the end, and she blinked fast, brushing at the corner of her eye. Now, that tiny tremble in her voice tugged at me just a bit. I'm not made of stone. But I wasn't about to let her off easy. "Why did you say it?" I asked gently. "Out of all the things you could have said to me on a day that's supposed to be about love and unity, why choose those words?" Her breath shuddered. "Because I was scared." She closed her eyes as if the admission itself hurt. "Scared you'd take him away from me." Those words hit me strange, unexpected, almost surreal, and I let out a soft little "huh" without meaning to. She rushed on like she had to spill everything before shame took the reins again. "He talks about you so fondly. Always has. I saw the way he looks at you when you laugh with him. I know what you mean to him. I know how close you two are. I just kept thinking, what if after we're married he still calls you for everything? What if I never feel like enough? What if I'm just second place forever?" A sigh slipped out of me, but it wasn't heavy or frustrated this time. It was more of a tender, aching sound, like the soul trying to soften. I didn't expect that kind of confession, especially not from her. It startled something empathetic awake in me. "I didn't want to lose my place," she whispered, voice trembling again. "I thought if I pushed you out just a little, I could, I don't know, protect what I had." I stared at her, stunned by the mix of naivety and desperation in her explanation. My hands slowly lowered from where they'd been crossed over my chest. She wasn't a villain. Not at her core, she was just young, insecure, afraid of shadows that weren't even there. "Child," I said softly, "loving him doesn't take anything from you. It doesn't take from me either. There's room plenty of it for all kinds of love in a person's life. Different loves don't replace each other, they build each other up." Her chin wobbled, and when the tear finally escaped down her cheek, she swiped it away quickly, embarrassed. "I messed up," she whispered. "Yes," I answered honestly. "You did." She winced like the truth sliced her, but she didn't argue. I stepped forward, slow and calm. "But let me tell you something," I continued. "You didn't just hurt me, you hurt him. And that boy, bless his heart, has always wanted harmony more than anything. He deserves better from both of us." She nodded vigorously, a quiet, broken "oh" slipping from her as she fought to keep her composure. "I'll fix it," she said quickly. "I'll apologize. I'll explain. I don't want to start our marriage like this." Her sincerity began to seep through the panic, and as much as my pride had been bruised earlier, something in me softened enough to give her space to grow. "I don't need perfection from you," I told her gently, "but I do need honesty, respect, and understanding that family is a wide net. There's room enough for us both without shoving anybody off the edge." She nodded again, sniffling softly, and this time her posture shifted, not defensive, not guarded, but open, vulnerable. "I'm sorry," she said again, voice steadier than before. "I hear you," I said. We stood there in the quiet corridor, two women tied to the same man in very different ways, learning how to coexist without tearing one another down. For the first time that day, the tension didn't feel like a storm. It felt like the breaking of clouds. Then, faintly, someone called her name from the reception, and she wiped her face with the back of her hand, trying to make herself presentable again. "We should go," she whispered. "They're waiting." "Yes," I said. "Let's walk in together." And as we headed back down that hallway, I felt an odd warmth settling in my chest. Not forgiveness yet, maybe not fully, but the beginning of something that might grow into it if we handled it right. When we reached the doorway, she hesitated just a breath, then turned to me. "Thank you," she murmured. I nodded, offering a small, gentle smile. "This is a new start," I whispered back. "Let's not waste it." And with that, we stepped inside, side by side, back into the glow of celebration. Still fragile, still uncertain, but taking the first step towards something better. A soft cheer rose from inside the reception hall just as we stepped through the doorway together, and for a moment I felt something shift in the air around us. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just a subtle change, like a room exhaling after holding its breath too long. The lights cast a warm glow across the floor, and the scent of sweet frosting drifted from the cake table. My feet slowed as my eyes scanned the space, taking in the bright colors, the flowers arranged with such loving care, and the clusters of smiling guests who had no idea what storms had passed in the hallway just moments earlier. I didn't expect him to notice us so quickly, but he did. His face lit up the instant he saw me walking beside her. That look full of relief, affection, and something like gratitude washed over me like a warm wave. Lord, my chest fluttered a bit, and I whispered a tiny, "Oh gracious," under my breath without meaning to. He hurried toward us, suit jacket swaying as he wove between tables. When he reached us, he glanced at her first, then at me, trying to read the room, trying to guess whether the fire had simmered or grown. His voice trembled just slightly when he asked, "Is everything all right?" She spoke first, voice soft but steady. "We talked." He turned to me, waiting. I gave a slow nod. "We did." I watched the tension fall from his shoulders so quickly it was almost visible. His relief pulsed through that space, and I felt something loosen inside me too. He reached out, squeezing my hand gently, a gesture he'd done since he was little enough to hold only 2 of my fingers. That memory slipped into me like a quiet hum, easing the ache I'd been carrying. The music shifted to something tender, and someone invited the newlyweds toward the center of the dance floor. The 2 of them hesitated, then walked forward, hand in hand. I watched his posture soften. He tugged her close, murmuring something that made her give the faintest smile. My heart squeezed. That smile wasn't bright yet, but it was real, and mercy, that mattered more than anything. I found a seat off to the side, sinking into the chair as I released a breath I didn't even know I'd been holding. A couple of guests passed by, offering kind nods, and one woman patted my shoulder with a cheerful little, "Hey there, honey," making me chuckle quietly. The weight of the earlier moment still lingered, but the air felt gentler now, like something wounded was slowly knitting back together. As they danced, I studied them. 2 young souls figuring out how to build something lasting in a world that moves too fast and cuts too deep sometimes. They swayed in a rhythm that wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And seeing them there, wrapped up in each other, stirred something deep and warm inside me. Maybe it was pride, maybe relief, maybe hope, maybe all of it, mixing like light through stained glass. Then, halfway through the song, she glanced over at me. And this time, instead of fear, her eyes held something softer. Not yet peace, but an invitation to it. I nodded back, giving her a tiny smile. My throat tightened unexpectedly, and I had to blink fast to clear the warmth gathering behind my lashes. A sweet laugh bubbled from somebody near the dessert table, pulling my attention. People were enjoying themselves again, unbothered, unaware. Life had moved on, as it always does, but I felt different somehow, like the ground had shifted beneath us in a small but meaningful way. After the dance, servers brought out sparkling drinks, and folks raised their glasses. The host asked the families to stand together for a moment. When I rose, I felt a little flicker in my belly, one of those delicate flutters that comes when life hands you a chance to step into a brighter moment. The host lifted the microphone. "We want to acknowledge both families tonight," he said warmly. Every union begins with 2 people, but it grows because of the love surrounding them. Images flickered in my mind. Birthdays, scraped knees, school plays, quiet talks on long car rides, years of nurturing him into a man capable of loving deeply. And alongside those memories, I saw her, still learning, still growing, still figuring out how to fit her heart next to his. The host gestured for us to join the couple near the cake. When I approached, he placed his hand lightly on my arm and whispered, "I'm glad you're here." That soft confession unraveled something tight inside me, sending a little ache curling through my chest in the sweetest way. I murmured, "Oh, sweetheart," with a shaky breath, brushing my thumb over his knuckles before letting go. We gathered close. Cameras flashed. Someone joked about how tall he looked between us, and folks chuckled. Even she let out a small, airy laugh, one that sounded more unguarded than anything I'd heard from her that day. Then came a moment I didn't expect. She stepped toward me, not timidly, not reluctantly, but with purpose. Her voice was quiet, but clear enough for nearby guests to hear as she said, "I'm grateful you're part of today." My breath caught for a split second, not because the words were grand, but because they were honest, soft, intentional. That simple admission carved a tiny opening, a window where something stronger than apology could take root. I nodded back slowly. "And I'm grateful you love him," I whispered. The corner of her mouth lifted just enough to show something blooming, fragile, new, but real. As more pictures were taken, I stood there with them, feeling the warmth of lights above and the hum of voices around us. Life didn't feel perfect, but it felt like it was turning in the right direction, inch by gentle inch. Later that evening, as I stepped out onto the small balcony for some air, the cool breeze brushed my face. The night sky stretched wide overhead, twinkling like it had stories of its own to tell. I leaned against the railing, humming a soft tune my own mother used to sing. My heart felt tender, full in a way I hadn't expected when the day began. Quiet footsteps approached behind me. She appeared again, but this time she didn't look afraid. She looked thoughtful. "I'd like to learn from you," she said softly. "Not replace anything, just learn." Emotion slid through me, warm and rich. My throat tightened again. I nodded slowly. "Then we'll figure this out together." She exhaled, a long, steady breath, as if letting go of something heavy she'd been carrying for too long. For the first time, I believed we truly could begin again. A hush rested over the night as the last of the guests drifted out beneath strings of glowing lights, their laughter fading down the walkway like soft echoes. I lingered by the doorway a moment longer, letting the warmth of the evening settle into my bones. My shoes ached, my back hummed, and my heart felt tender in a way I hadn't experienced in years. For the first time that day, silence finally wrapped around me, gentle and unhurried. I took a breath that reached all the way down to the base of my chest, steadying myself after the long storm of emotions. Mercy, I needed that breath. When I stepped outside, the moon hung low above the parking lot, a soft pearl against the deep sky. The cool night air brushed my cheeks like a quiet apology from the world itself. I moved slowly toward my car, the hem of my dress sweeping the ground, each step tapping lightly against the pavement. A faint melody from the DJ drifted through the open windows, some slow tune that carried a hint of nostalgia. It felt like a whisper of old memories passing by one last time. I was halfway to the car when I heard footsteps behind me, not hurried, not uncertain, just steady. I turned, and there he was, my child, walking toward me with that familiar sway in his shoulders, the one he had even as a little boy. His jacket was unbuttoned now, and his tie hung loose, but his eyes were bright in the dim light, filled with something soft, something like love wrapped in gratitude. He came to a stop just a few steps away and let out a small breath. "Mama?" he said, voice heavy with meaning. "Thank you for everything today." Those words washed over me so suddenly my knees nearly wobbled. Something warm rose inside my throat, and I had to blink a few times to keep the sting of tears from spilling over. I let out a quiet "oh child" under my breath, the sound slipping out before I could stop it. I reached out and touched his cheek lightly, the way I used to when he couldn't sleep at night. And for a moment, he leaned into my hand the same way he did back then, as if time folded in on itself. "I'm proud of you," I whispered. "More than you'll ever know." He swallowed. "I'm proud of you too." Lord, it wrapped around my heart like a warm quilt. I gave his hand one last squeeze before letting go, watching as he looked back at the building behind us. Through the glass doors, I saw her standing near the entrance, watching quietly from a distance, her expression thoughtful, not tense, not afraid, just open. He followed my gaze. "She wants to do better." "I think today changed something." I nodded, a slow, deep nod that came from the center of my chest. "Growth always starts somewhere," I said, "even if the first step feels messy." He breathed in, steadying himself, then offered me a small, boyish smile. "I love you, Mama." The sound of those words, full-grown, earnest, gentle, wrapped itself around every scar today had left behind. My heart swelled, tender and full. I brushed my thumb across his knuckles one last time, a tiny motion that felt like sealing a quiet promise. Then he hugged me, strong and warm, and for a moment I let myself rest in that embrace. His heartbeat pressed against my shoulder, steady and sure, and I whispered a soft with my eyes closed, letting it hold me together. When he pulled back, he stepped away slowly, like he didn't want to break the moment too quickly. I watched him walk back toward her. She stepped forward, meeting him halfway, and when he reached for her hand, she didn't hesitate. They stood together at the doorway, framed in golden wedding light, and then she looked toward me. Her eyes softened with something new, a quiet resolve, a promise of trying. She lifted her hand in a small, shy wave. My breath trembled, and I lifted mine in return. Not a goodbye, a beginning. I turned back toward my car, unlocking the door as a warm breeze rustled the nearby trees. The night smelled of roses and distant laughter, carrying just a trace of sweetness that made my chest swell. As I settled into the driver's seat, I let my palms rest on the steering wheel for a moment, the leather cool beneath my hands. A low hum escaped my throat, some old tune my grandmother used to sing after long days full of lessons. It carried a comfort that wrapped itself around me like soft wool. I glanced back at the building one last time. Through the main window, I saw the two of them leaning close together, talking quietly. Their silhouettes stood side by side, not perfect, not polished, but trying. And sometimes that's all love needs to begin again. Two people willing to stand in the same light, learning each other's shape all over. As I started the engine, a tender ache rolled through me, the kind that comes when something broken has the chance to heal. I rested my hand over my chest, feeling the rise and fall of my breath, steady and alive. My lips curved into a soft smile. After everything that had happened, after all the sting and trembling moments, the day had given us something rare, a second chance draped in humility. And mercy, I was grateful for it. I eased the car onto the quiet road, headlights stretching across the pavement. The night opened ahead of me, wide and peaceful, carrying the hum of crickets and the faint glow of passing streetlights. I rolled the window down a little, letting the cool air brush my arm. A quiet chuckle left me, gentle as honey, when I thought back to the start of the day, how heavy everything felt, how small I'd felt under the weight of somebody else's fear. And now, here I was, ending the night with peace settling inside me like warm tea. As I drove away from the venue, the road winding softly beneath me, I whispered a small thank you into the night. Not to anyone in particular, just a thank you for growth, for truth, for mending hearts, for the courage to stay when leaving felt easier, and for the delicate way healing sometimes begins in moments we never see coming. And somewhere deep inside, I knew this was only the start of a new chapter. Not perfect, not simple, but honest. And that was enough. Before you head out, sweetheart, tell me where you're listening from tonight. I love seeing the cities and towns you call home. It feels like I'm rocking on the porch, sharing stories with folks from all over the world. And if this story held your heart for a moment, tap that like button so it can reach someone who might need it. Make sure you hit subscribe too. That's how you and I stay connected, week after week, through every new chapter life brings. I'll be right here, waiting to tell you the next story.